Back in 1998, a legendary RPG released that changed the very scope of RPG gaming forever. A game so powerful, none could stop it. It ruled atop a mountain of its foes, proving to the world that it was the greatest, and at the peak, it rested, with only a few capable of standing at the same great heights. There, it nurtured its children and unleashed them in a flurry down upon the rest of the world. The game, as we can all guess, is Chrono Trigger. Recently, I spoke ill of this magnificent beast, when I claimed I wished, at least partially, that it did not exist. But in order to truly understand something, one must experience it, and seeing as it had been so long since I tackled this monolith of a game, I decided to refresh my memory. But why exactly is Chrono Trigger such a big deal? Why do so many games use its name? Why are so many RPGs today inspired by it, even if just a little bit? That is the question I've set out to answer. Chrono Trigger is the inspiration for so many games. Some good, some not so good. But even in cases where Chrono Trigger isn't the main inspiration, it's almost always the first one mentioned. This video will contain spoilers, so if you're one of the lucky few who haven't played Chrono Trigger, you should probably pause this video and go play it. It's not an extremely long game, and I hear it's pretty good. In order to tackle the question of why Chrono Trigger is an inspiration for so many, I thought it would be cool to discuss the high points and low points of the game, what I think makes for good inspiration, and what I hope fewer games take as inspiration. And to really discuss what makes Chrono Trigger so good in the first place, we need to tackle the final boss. Lavos is a being from outer space, but that's not revealed to you early on. In fact, almost nothing to you is revealed early on. You don't really even know about Lavos' existence for the first hour or two of the game. That's part of what makes Lavos so interesting though. He's not an in-your-face antagonist. He's not scheming, he's not trying to gain any upper hands, he's simply an inevitability. Lavos is a primal force, a force of nature, one that you learn bits and pieces about throughout the game, and one that you can fight basically at any point once you learn about its existence. This type of antagonist is very compelling to me. It can't be explained by human desires. There's no reason for Lavos to be evil. It's just doing what it was made to do. Sure, most of the game you're dealing with people around Lavos who are trying to use it or summon it, but you don't really know what Lavos really is. All you know is that it's everywhere. At every step of the journey, Lavos, or something related to him anyway, is waiting for you. This sort of background antagonist who's pervasive in the game world is common in games such as Chained Echoes and Sea of Stars, two games I've spoken on previously that are deeply inspired by Chrono Trigger, and it's one of the smaller points that I think is a fantastic takeaway from this game. It's not uncommon for antagonists to be this primal force of nature whose origins aren't entirely clear, but it is engaging in a different way from your standard human-born villains, and while it may not be unique on its own, Lavos was, for many, the first time they encountered a primal beast with no ulterior motive. Mechanically though is where I think Chrono Trigger really inspires the least. There are some key points we'll discuss later, but Chrono Trigger is generally a pretty simple game. For the time it came out, it featured more unique combat, but there's only really a couple of mechanics in the game I can say are actually special, and the first one is the nature of magic. Many games feature an elemental weakness system, where enemies are weak to ice or fire and absorb other elements, but Chrono Trigger takes it a step further than that. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on this, but there are a number of enemies in Chrono Trigger, specifically the dinosaur enemies, that react to being hit by the right element. This is done loosely in some games, but is the overarching theme of combat for an entire area of Chrono Trigger. Elemental affinities themselves aren't unique, but at the time, the majority of games just had weaknesses and resistances, maybe a boss that reacted to spells in a certain way, but seldom did random enemies. In fact, enemy reactions to your magic are so common in Chrono Trigger that they can influence the party composition you bring, with several enemies that react to your spells with spells of their own unless you pick the right element. And spells being separated by element on each character means you can't always rely on the same party members. Many games already have loose designs of this. Off the top of my head, Final Fantasy has slimes who resist physical damage, and a lot of games include enemies with barrier shift mechanics, like Magus, a boss whose entire first phase is based on barrier shift. I find that this is one of the most interesting parts of Chrono Trigger combat, but I don't actually see stuff like this too often in more modern games, even those that claim to be inspired by Chrono Trigger. Often, modern games make magic less important to the flow of combat, but here in Chrono Trigger, it's the core mechanic. I'm not entirely sure why I don't see this more often, and it might just be that I've missed those games. While the battle itself is pretty simple but engaging, it does have flaws that I've surprisingly seen a lot more in modern games. namely the way encounters are handled. Now, don't get your pitchforks out. I'm not saying the way Chrono Trigger handled encounters is necessarily bad. Random encounters are hard to balance and seldom end up entertaining, but Chrono Trigger's enemies are just as frustrating. Many encounters are completely unavoidable, forcing you to fight them to get through an area, which wouldn't be so bad if they didn't respawn every time you change screens, with a few exceptions. There's also just a lot of enemies, and with battles happening on the field, you often can't sneak by them even after running away. I'm all for games adopting Chrono Trigger's battle on the field style, and encounters being set isn't unique, but the way it positions its encounters makes many areas a slog, with multiple unavoidable threats every time you pass through. There are many solutions to this. Make pathways more clear, give the party an auto-win against weaker enemies, or just make enemies avoid you when you're stronger. Ultimately though, Chrono Trigger's combat and encounters are just a way to progress in the story, and I think a big part of why people have such a love for Chrono Trigger is because of how the story feels. The world of Chrono Trigger is split between 5 different eras to explore. The lack of knowledge every character has of the places that they're going to be, and the lack of direct presence the main antagonist has, lends itself well to this overarching sense of adventure. Chrono Trigger feels fantastical, and I think that's why so many games are inspired by it and have such a heavy emphasis on world building. Every new place has more to dig up, and plenty of story information is only really revealed to you if you take your time and explore, interacting with locals and piecing together whatever information you can glean from them. While many games like the Final Fantasy series have a heavier emphasis on a struggle between groups, Chrono Trigger is just a good old-fashioned fantasy adventure to stop an evil space monster from parasitizing your planet. Personally, I don't really think either approach to storytelling is inherently better than the other, but some of my favorite games focus on adventure and world building as the core component. However, while the world of Chrono Trigger has convinced me, I'm not entirely convinced by the ensemble of Chrono Trigger. The cast is one of the bigger issues I have with the game in general, particularly Chrono himself. Frankly, I just don't like silent protagonists. They're not something I enjoy. The general idea is that you're supposed to insert yourself over them, making you the hero of the story, but Chrono, he's just boring. The problem is his connection to other party members. There are a few times, particularly near the end of the game, where the game tries to tug on your heartstrings with Chrono, but I just feel disconnected, as there's no real substance to his character beyond, being a hero? That just makes these cutscenes awkward to me. I don't care about Chrono, and I'm not particularly attached to anybody else. Well, that's not entirely true. I love Frog. Look at him. What's not to love? Verily! But the rest of the cast are just alright. Robo, Luca, Marl, and Isla are all interesting characters in their own way, but their archetypes don't make me want to engage with them as much. Characters are ultimately subjective, just like the story though, and these characters are likely to have inspired many others. But Chrono Trigger's party often gets the short end of the stick, seeing as how often you can bring anybody you want anywhere you go, and that means that they're just not as important in the individual story beats. I think this stifles the game's own narrative by making it more difficult to connect to. Each character has the same reason for being here, and you can bring whoever you want, but they aren't linked to most of the places you'll visit. They don't have much to say or do, they're just there. My biggest issue is still Chrono though. Now, I can't say that silent protagonists are a Chrono Trigger thing. I think a more famous series to utilize one would be Dragon Quest, but if someone is looking at Chrono Trigger with the intent to borrow this idea, please think twice about it. Other silent protagonists in media I've enjoyed tend to be simpler characters, whose decisions are entirely the players'. You're not meant to get attached to the heroes in Dragon Quest as much, and while they're still rather forgettable, I'm not expected to care about their eventual death and rebirth like I am Chrono's. As I've already mentioned, the player party also feels disconnected from the rest of the game, as our main characters seldom have much input to the actual story happening around them. They have their moments, but often they don't have much to say, simply being there to do some fighting or bear witness to a major event. I've seen this type of writing before, and while it's not necessarily bad, it's just not my cup of tea. Chrono Trigger at least has enough moments for you to grow attached to the party members, but I do wish there was more to latch onto. Frog, who is my favorite character, has quite a few story beats when it comes to fighting against Magus in his time period, but he isn't all that interesting afterward. And a lot of the first sections of Zeal almost feel like the characters might as well not even be there, and it's because the only constant in our party is Chrono, the silent one. It makes for dialogue being flat when the character doesn't have to be there. Their responses have to be simple enough to fit in any composition and scene, so they end up just less interesting. Perhaps one of the more influential mechanics for people to take inspiration from in Chrono Trigger is the skill system itself. In Chrono Trigger, party members can combo abilities together, using both of their turns to execute a stronger attack than they could have on their own. This is integral to the gameplay loop. Be it team heals, major damage, or a strong single target spell, every character has different skills, and every character in turn has different combos with everyone else. This pushes the battle system the extra mile, and it encourages you to try different team comps, and spend some of the quest with every different character. This has inspired a lot of other games. Sea of Stars is the most notable in the indie scene, but even other major titles like I Am Setsuna, which I spoke about briefly in my last video, use this mechanic verbatim with next to no changes. I know that's not the most fair comparison, as it has already been pointed out to me that I Am Setsuna was published by Square Enix, but it does still stand as a game that took a lot directly from Chrono Trigger and ended up not landing with its audience nearly as well. It's hard to say who is inspired by what with this one, but it is a system that Chrono Trigger executes incredibly well. It's a mechanic that can be implemented in a lot of different ways, and probably my key mechanical takeaway from Chrono Trigger itself. But there is one more thing, something I'm really surprised I haven't been seeing in a lot of indie games as of late. Something else that Chrono Trigger did. Did you know that Chrono Trigger has 13 endings? You probably did, yeah. But that's really cool. There are some games that feature multiple endings in the genre, but Chrono Triggers to me always felt unique. For instance, if you beat the game after recruiting Isla, but before defeating the Reptites, you get an ending where everyone is reptile people. Or if you beat the game after recruiting Frog, but before fighting Magus, you'll see Frog go to duel Magus himself. Each ending has different unlock requirements and drastically changes the result of the game, but most of them can be missed entirely. This is really cool, and I'm surprised it isn't something I've seen in the indie scene. But there is one thing that you cannot copy. There's something no one can copy, something too integral to Chrono Trigger, the lightning in a bottle that cannot be recaptured. I'm talking, of course, about the feelings we all had when we played Chrono Trigger for the first time. No matter what you do, no matter how similar you make another game, what you make is something new. It isn't Chrono Trigger. It won't ever match the childhood wonder many of us had. You can't do it no matter how hard you try. Nostalgia will always just be nostalgia. And that's okay. Chrono Trigger has a lot of fans, and a lot of cool mechanics. It has a timeless story that doesn't try too hard to explain itself, opting instead to let you become immersed in its world. It seamlessly transitions from action to exploration, even if that's a little frustrating at times. With more than a couple different endings to chase and a lot of different team comps to try, you can play Chrono Trigger a lot. We don't need another Chrono Trigger, and every game trying to be that is still its own game, heavily inspired or not. Much like Lavos, it is inevitable that other games are made, and whether it is Chrono Trigger, Xenogears, Final Fantasy, or any number of popular games, there will always be people inspired by them. All art is derivative. It's not Chrono Trigger's fault that people love it so much they want to make a dozen love letters. Or maybe it is? I don't know, is that how this works? I said in my last video that I almost wish Chrono Trigger didn't exist, and to be honest, that's not how I really feel. I love this game. I've played it maybe 6 times now, and I'm grateful for the joy it's given me. Chrono Trigger absolutely deserves its legacy. There's a lot I like about it. There's also a lot I hate about it, but that doesn't really change the truth. If you make things you love, and you make them your own, people can tell. If you make something because you love something else, it is inevitable that what you will make ends up being disappointing. So that's how I feel about Chrono Trigger, the stuff that inspires me, and the stuff that doesn't. Let me know if there's a mechanic or a theme in a game that you wish would be explored more. I'd like to see a fresh take on Golden Sun's Jin system. It's just so unique. Thank you all for watching this video, and the last thing I want to say is I honestly never expected this kind of support. I'm grateful to be able to share my passion with you all, and I hope you continue to join me as I rant about fantasy games in the direction of a microphone. See you in the next one.